Jonathan Hetterly here, and today I'm going to be discussing the psychological themes found in HBO's documentary, Robin Williams' Come Inside My Mind. Psych Cinema is Shrink Tank's video series where I explore the psychology found in the films that I watch and love. But before we get started, do me a favor. Subscribe to our channel and click on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any time we drop new videos that explore the intersection of psychology and pop culture. Now, I'm going to first give a little bit of a disclaimer here. I've seen the documentary, Robin Williams' Come Inside My Mind, and I have to say I was not blown away by it. Robin Williams, the actor, is a very fascinating person to me, and I remember growing up loving Mork and Mindy, and especially connecting to a lot of his iconic roles in films such as Good Morning Vietnam, Good Will Hunting, even Aladdin, and then certainly films like Awakenings or Dead Poets Society, where he actually demonstrated more of his dramatic chops. So I've always liked him as an actor, but I have to admit, this documentary, in my opinion, doesn't live up to its title. I really didn't get to know Robin Williams that much more than what I went into the documentary already knowing about the actor and the person. So in some ways, today I'm going to be using my experience and knowledge as a mental health professional to talk a little bit about some of the psychological themes that were hinted at and maybe slightly explored in the documentary, but I feel like it certainly could go a lot deeper, and there's a lot more that we know about these topics than maybe the film kind of allotted time for. First and foremost, I want to talk about humor. Because one of the old stereotypes about comedians is that they have to have a very troubled or dark childhood, and humor is really this coping mechanism, or it's a way that they get out a lot of anger and darkness in their life. Now, by all accounts, the documentary shows us that Robin Williams had, for the most part, a pretty normal childhood. I mean, there were ups and downs, and he's a byproduct of his era, which means he really had a stronger, closer relationship with his mother than with his father. And one of the interesting things, though, is that he points to his mom as actually being the funniest person that he's ever known. And you get to see a little bit of some footage between Robin Williams' mom and him. And you see that she is a very delightful and charming and funny person. So in a lot of ways, we can kind of assume that humor was really just a common form of communication and connection in his childhood and his family life, rather than it was this coping mechanism to get through a really dark or troubled childhood. And so in a lot of ways, we even at Shrink Tank, we explore the positive psychology of humor. And how humor can be a tool and a device that really helps people connect, helps us kind of process sometimes some very difficult or emotional topics. And Robin Williams, even later on in his stand-up, would tackle a lot of sensitive topics, but he would use humor to kind of disarm it while at the same time speaking to larger truths about that. And so now I really want to talk about a huge portion of Robin Williams' life that I don't think gets as much time in the documentary as I think is warranted. And that's really his ongoing struggles with substance abuse. Now, we learned from the documentary that he was actually with John Belushi the night that he overdosed. And that really kind of shook Robin, and it made him even look at his own drug habits and use, to the point where he got clean for a sustained period of time. But we also saw throughout the rest of the documentary and what we know about his personal life that was a struggle that he had on and off throughout his life. And that's kind of what we know about a lot of times substance abuse and addiction, is that it can be a chronic disease that even if somebody's in what we would call active sobriety or recovery, that they have to continue to manage that struggle and really put a lot of attention and effort and commitment towards preserving their sobriety or recovery, versus a certain period of clean time means that you're fixed or you're cured or that you've conquered that disease or that challenge. And in a lot of ways, Robin Williams kind of embodies somebody that seemed to just have a lot of ups and downs, highs and lows throughout his life, and his drug use seems to be one of those areas that was never completely stable. And then if we think about his ups and downs with drug problems, then we kind of pivot and look at his up and down mental and emotional instability. By all accounts, Robin Williams suffered from depression, and maybe it wasn't something that was as open and visible to others as maybe his substance use. But again, it's another thing that you kind of see in his life, and sometimes even in his career arc, the highs and lows, the ups and downs. Sometimes even in the same films, you see this euphoric, exuberant person, and then you see someone that's really kind of downtrodden and really kind of like just emotionally sensitive. And in some ways, we know more now about the interaction of mental health and addiction than even during Robin Williams' early years. We know now that it's more the expectation, rather the exception, that those that suffer from addiction have an underlying or co-occurring mental health diagnosis. And so for those that report ongoing substance abuse problems or addiction, over half of them have an identifiable mental health disorder, whether it be anxiety, whether it be depression, whether it already means because they have a very vulnerable brain, hypersensitivity, or it was introduced through kind of the ups and downs of the unmanageability of their life based upon some of the choices or the drug use. Because we know anxiety and depression are actually two of the most common withdrawal symptoms for those that are trying to come clean. And so anybody, even if they don't have clinical depression or anxiety, if they have a severe drug habit and they try to kick it, they're probably going to experience some intense levels of depression and anxiety as they go through that early abstinence, early recovery period. And so we think about the ups and downs of addiction with Robin Williams, and then we kind of look at his overall mental health and stability or instability and the ups and downs of that. And that kind of actually, the two of them together kind of highlight one trait that I think Robin Williams really struggled with, which was impulsivity. And so you sort of see that highly sensitive, highly stimulated personality or temperament of Robin Williams, which we know there's a high correlation with substance abuse and addiction because it's sensation-seeking, easily bored. They have a sensation-seeking type of brain, but they can also be very hypersensitive as well. For folks that are on the ADHD continuum, they not only need high stimulation, but the absence of that, like boredom, it's very distressing to their brain, to where while other people can really tolerate boredom and not a lot going on, for someone with a very highly sensitive and highly stimulated brain, they need constant stimulation. They need constant external gratification or stimulation. And by all accounts, Robin Williams really exhibited that type of temperament and that type of brain. And we see that in a number of ways. We see that with the emotional instability of being a deep feeler. And part of that can be not only the euphoria of a crowd and people pleasing and entertaining people, but we also see like his retreating from people and feeling kind of isolated and getting really down and depressed when he's not with other people. And that really is somebody that's a deep feeler, that is highly stimulated from external environments and external people, places, and things. We also know that impulsivity has a high correlation of abusing drugs because of how it interacts with the brain. And so you're going to get a very heightened euphoric sensation from drug use that somebody without that kind of highly stimulated brain might experience. But then even if you pull away from the addiction, you pull away from the mental health, there's a lot of other aspects of Robin Williams' life, and it's hinted at in the documentary, that kind of alludes to his sensation-seeking, highly stimulated brain. We see that with his lack of boundaries when it came to relationships. He had difficulty, quite honestly, saying no. Now, in one of his marriages, there was sort of an unspoken kind of resignation or acceptance that he was not going to be faithful. But we kind of see throughout times that Robin Williams sort of need to entertain, need to be loved, constantly needing to be around other people and getting that adoration. He struggled with boundaries and saying no versus that highly stimulated, highly sensation-seeking type of behavior. And so boundaries and impulsivity really seem to be something that Robin Williams struggled with. So even though we might think of somebody at Robin Williams' stage of life, he was 63 years old, and then obviously with his prominence and his acclaim, what on earth would drive somebody to take their own life. And first and foremost, again, there's kind of a murkiness around the circumstances and whether or not he was fully aware and conscious of his decisions based upon, again, his cognitive decline and his chronic pain. But we know that he's not alone at that age of people that are considering or take steps to end their life via suicide. And I think that can be a sobering wake-up call to our culture, that not just to focus on suicide rates of young people or in our early adulthood, but that this is a troubling trend we are seeing at every age and stage of life, that we as a culture really need to give proper attention to all the different generations that are struggling managing their own life, managing their emotions, and managing their thoughts. In some ways, I want to commend the documentary of not jumping into over-sensationalizing that, but again, it kind of just leaves another gap in understanding Robin Williams, somebody that I think is a very fascinating person, but the documentary itself didn't really open up a new way of understanding the comic or the person. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Psych Cinema. What did you think of this documentary? Did you love it more than I did? Are there other things that you honed in on that I kind of overlooked or just kind of glossed over here? Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, or be sure to leave me a recommendation of a movie that you would like for me to analyze here on Psych Cinema. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and check out shrinktank.com, where you'll find articles, videos, podcasts, and more as we explore the arts and entertainment industry through the lens of psychology and pop culture. Thanks again for watching Psych Cinema. Until next time, this is Jonathan Hetterly. Take care.
All my love to you, puppet. You're going to be all right. Bye-bye.